सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावतीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are good to go.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, from Ashtanga Yoga Mandir in association with the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center of the High Commission of India. This program has been organized in celebration of the Pre-International Day of Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga Mandir, also known as AYM, is a center for yogic knowledge in Colombo, Sri Lanka, which provides resources and facilities to learn and practice yogic knowledge since 1953. The Institute offers the Diploma in Hatha Yoga Instructing and Yogic Lifestyle Counseling and also the Advanced Diploma in Yoga Therapy. AYM is globally affiliated to several international yoga associations such as Asian Yoga Therapy, SVCC Yoga University in India, and Vivekananda Yoga Global, Singapore. In addition, the Institute conducts classes for corporates, senior citizens, yoga for ladies and kids, and therapy yoga sessions for health issues. Furthermore, we conduct workshops to further convey our knowledge of yoga. One of the fundamentals of yoga is managing one's energy. The energy of a person is of two types, namely internal and external. Just like how we focus on managing our internal energy within us, it is also required to manage one's external energy. With that being said, wealth falls under one's external energy, and today's topic, budgeting and investing in a pandemic, will give us more insight on how we can manage our wealth. Today's session will be moderated by Ms. Arunya Selladure. Over to you, Arunya.
Thank you, Tahira. Good evening, everyone. Today's discussion will cover two aspects of managing your personal finances: tips on budgeting your day-to-day life and investing your savings. Our speakers will focus on providing insight on managing both aspects amidst the pandemic. The session will aim to provide you some general tips and will not delve into too many specific technical details, keeping in mind that this is a public session and the audience are from varied backgrounds. However, we encourage everyone in the audience to raise any questions that you have through the chat option, and we will take them up following the presentations. With that, I would now like to introduce both our speakers, Ms. Loshini Gajendran and Ms. Isuri Munasinghe. Our first speaker for the day, Ms. Isuri Munasinghe, has extensive capital market experience as a research analyst covering global and Sri Lankan equities. Most recently, she worked as the publishing analyst covering the insurance and leisure sector in Asia Securities Equity, as a member of one of the leading equity research teams in Sri Lanka. Prior to that, she covered the global automotive and transport sectors as an offshore analyst for a German investment bank at Moody's Analytics. She's a holder of Bachelor of Commerce, majoring in Economics and Finance from the University of Melbourne. Currently, Isuri works as a quality inclusion specialist at Market Development Facility, an Australian government-funded multi-country initiative. They focus on designing interventions in the local economy to promote investments, cross-organizational coordination, and inclusive economic growth. Some of the interventions Isuri is currently working on include assessing the effect of debt traps on the livelihoods of local fishing communities, and scoping for potential insurance products that mitigate climate change risk for the farmers. Our second speaker, Ms. Loshini Gajendran, is a director at Gajma & Co., a leading firm of chartered accountants that specialize in taxation and carries out all professional services from incorporation to liquidation. Previously, she was an executive director and vice president at Goldman Sachs International in London, a leading global investment bank. She has also worked as a summer analyst at the Citigroup in London, MAS Intimates, and corporate finance and fixed income securities divisions of HNB Bank. Loshini currently serves as a non-executive director in many companies in industries such as automobile detailing and information technology. She is an associate of the Sri Lanka Institute of Directors, a member of the Business Network International, and is the chairperson of Ladies Circle 3 in Sri Lanka. She is a CFA charter holder, a globally acclaimed certification for investment professionals. She is also an associate chartered management accountant and holds a bachelor's in mathematics and economics from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Welcome, both of you. With that, I will now hand over the session to Isuri, who will share with us some insights on balancing your expenses, drawing upon her personal and professional experience from working in the capital markets and in her current role of measuring outcomes of economic investment interventions. Over to you, Isuri.
Thank you, Arunya, and thank you, Ashtanka Yoga Mande, for giving me this opportunity as well. I shall share my screen now. So today's discussion, I will be breaking it down to three parts. One part is that we first need to understand what the larger picture is that we're dealing with here, not only in Sri Lanka, but globally as well, and how that sort of trickles down to how it affects our spending, our earnings, and our future planning of expenses. Then we look at how should we prepare in this context. Once I've outlined the context, I will touch upon certain strategies you can take on to prepare your budget, prepare your finances accordingly, so you can mitigate some of the risks that you might face in this situation. Next is, if you are in a financial distress, I will run through some scenarios in which you might face financial distress, and in those situations, how you might face them, what the solutions, suggested solutions you can go through to mitigate them and come out of them. So let's just look at the larger picture. Now, the larger picture is what I like to call a catch-22. First, we have a race for resources. As you know, North America, Europe, and most of China, largely all of China, is vaccinated, and they are on the path to economic recovery. Economic recovery also means there is a pickup in economic activity. The economy as a whole is in a hunger drive to bring life to the way it was before we went into the pandemic. This also means that everyone is in a race to meet demand, which also means that there is a drive up in demand for resources. This means there's a drive up in prices of resources. This chart that you are seeing on your screen right now shows how energy, industrial metals, and agriculture, that is your corn or rice, all those agriculture products, basically commodities, how those prices have been picking up since January. Now, if you really look at the chart comparing from last year's prices, energy prices, that's your oil, crude oil, is just catching up to where it was pre-pandemic. Whereas your industrial materials, your iron, your copper, or your agriculture products and livestock is far ahead of where it was in 2019 or before pandemic. The reason for this is during the pandemic, we depleted all inventory that we had. Our lines of logistics fell down, capacity fell down. So we have hit bottom in terms of how much we have in our reserves. Now that the world is catching up, they are picking up their inventory, picking up how much they're demanding. But the logistical capacity is only so much that only so much of the demand can be met in a time. And when that capacity strain comes in, you have prices shooting up above what we saw before the pandemic. Then you have Sri Lanka, which is not on its path to recovery yet. We are facing a wave 3 of lockdowns and a pandemic cases picking up. Us, India, Malaysia, to an extent Singapore. So this part of the world is, us more so, is a bit behind in terms of keeping up with global recovery. It also means that it keeps us in the back foot of making use of the fact that the rest of the world is picking up in recovery. So this means that our factory operation is below capacity. We can't produce as much clothes. Our apparel industry can't produce as much clothes. Our agriculture or our fisheries or spices, our export industries can't produce as much to export to meet up with this demand. Savings capacity amongst the companies to stock up on these resources. If it's an industrial company, if it's a manufacturing company, their ability to buy the resources to catch up on inventory, they don't have enough cash to catch up. Then you have shipping and freight, which is already below capacity. And when we have a situation where we have import restrictions, as is, we don't have enough containers or freight capacity coming to the country so that we can export our goods to these countries that are demanding these goods. So we are on the back foot in terms of recovering or making use of the rest of the world to recover. So this also means that the demand for our currency against other currencies in the world will be low. This leads to a further weakening of the LKR against the main traded currency, which is the USD. You have weak exports, lower tourism earnings, weaker foreign worker remittances, and also to an extent, because of the situation we are in, foreigners are exiting our market as well, which means they are taking their money and going. That also leads to a weak demand for the LKR. So this chart is showing a particular organization that is forecasting the rupee to go above 200, possibly even touching 220 if it goes. That's the worst case scenario. And the rupee weakening going on to be weakened. So what does this mean in the full picture for us? It means we are going to be in a situation where recovery is there, but it's largely driven by prices. Because right now we are in a slow growth, but our resources that we depend on for our staples, for our day-to-day lives, for our industries to run are picking up in price, which means whatever we import, whatever we use is picking up in price, and that's going to trickle down to our everyday lives. Already we have seen a pickup. They have increased fuel prices for us. So that's one of the main things. And fuel is a huge component of inflation. Almost 12% of our inflation calculation goes for transport. So these things can pick up. On the other hand, when we are not importing as much, we are growing within the country, but we have certain limitations as to how much of certain foodstuff we can grow internally to meet the demand. So when there's a shortage, those things also tend to drive up in prices, and you would realize rice prices have picked up almost double in certain cases. So there's those factors as well. So given this full picture, how we have slow growth, but we also have inflation coming in, how should we prepare? How should we prepare our finances? Actually, let me just touch back on this chart. This chart shows Sri Lanka's GDP from 2020, which means if you had a certain amount of wealth in 2010 and you didn't invest it in investment that gave you at least the return of inflation, that amount of money today would almost have halved in terms of how much goods it can buy. That is largely because our GDP is so much of it, our growth is so much dependent on prices picking up rather than productivity or output growing. So this is, and right now towards the end of this chart, what you can see is our pickup is there even now. Last year, towards the end of last year, when we saw a pickup from the second lockdown, it was more driven by price rather than output or goods. So this means that whatever money you hold right now is going to lose its buying power, or how much goods you can buy with that pretty quickly. So in this scenario, how should you prepare? The key thing is to preserve your capital and diversify where you get your sources of income from. Let me start with a rainy day fund. you should have something called at least 6 months of living expenses saved up. This means if you are to lose your job today, or you are to lose all your sources of income, whatever your expenses are, at least for 6 months, needs to be kept in a secure, risk-free form, so that if in that case you have a fallback rainy fund to rely on, and you can continue to job hunt or reskill in that time period and not be fallen out of cash. Another thing you should do is not take work from home savings for granted. Now, all of us in a lockdown right now, we are not going out as much. We are not spending time as much with friends. We're not traveling as much. So we are seeing a bit of savings in our hand. Now, the mistake we tend to make is as soon as we lift lockdown, we go and spend that savings. We think, okay, we are free, we are out, the life's too short, let's just go and spend it up. But the situation is a bit tricky. So the suggestion would be to safeguard that savings and try and use that to build up this rainy day fund, because a likelihood of needing it, especially if you have a source of income which is not very stable or not fixed, it is likely that you will need this cash at some point. So use it as an opportunity to build up a buffer savings. If you have a USD based income and you have an NRFC account that the money comes to, don't convert it to LKR just yet. Especially since if we are seeing a continued depreciation in the rupee, keep it in dollar form as long as you can, because even though you see only 2-3% interest rate on it, you are going to make a bigger return by keeping it in dollar forms and cashing in on the rupee weakening. So the longer you keep it in dollars, the better. Convert it as and when required for monthly expenses. Diversify your income sources. Now, if family income sometimes can depend on one breadwinner, maybe two. If you can diversify. It would be a good option. Have more than one. If you're in the same industries, try and switch industries. So one can be in a more risky industry, then the other can switch to something that's more stable and more, say, essential services driven. A service or a good that is needed even in a difficult time. Look at dollarized sources of income. I will touch upon this in my next section as well. But if you are able to sort of reskill and jump on any of these freelancing gigs that are out there, especially that let you connect with foreign clients who pay in dollars, or you have a freelancing work that's online, but you work for a company that's based in a different company, you can earn a dollarized income. That would be quite good and can save you against dealing with inflation led with an LKR depreciation. Professional services, if you have multiple platforms, that's great. Say if you're a lawyer, architect, of course, a little difficult, but if you can find a way to diversify how you deliver your services, just like Sankhya Yoga Mandir went online with its yoga classes, think of multiple platforms, think of how the world of service delivery has changed, and see how you can diversify the way you offer your services. Business diversify into essential services. Now, say if you were running a business where the product or the good is not a good that people really need in a time of difficulty and might choose to not buy or purchase or use in a time of difficulty, then the likelihood of seeing demand is quite limited. So you might want to diversify your revenue streams within the business so that in a time of difficulty, you have something to fall back on. Preserving capital is very important. So as much as it's good to keep a rainy day fund, but don't keep it in cash either. Whatever cash you keep it for whatever you need for the next 2-3 months, maximum 12. Anything more than that, do not keep in cash. Now, in a situation like this, where we are having very, very low growth, very high inflation, technically, we should be able to increase our interest rates and curb some of that inflation. That's what's usually done. But when it's in a situation where we have high inflation and low growth, it's called stagflation. And in this situation, the government is in a bit of a fix. If you increase interest rates, yes, it might control people's spending, but then you want people to spend because that's what's driving growth. So you keep interest rates low to try and stimulate growth, stimulate investment, stimulate people spending. But then it's difficult to control inflation because, on the other hand, it's not a demand-led inflation, it's inflation because of cost factors outside of our control. So in this situation, you can't expect interest rates or your money kept in a fixed deposit in the bank to cover inflation. If you keep it in the bank for too long, at the point in time, it's going to be less, it will lose in value. So in that case, keep it in a capital preserving asset. Capital preserving assets are gold and land. Those are the easiest to access. Even if you see property prices maybe dipping a little bit or flattening out, it's still better than keeping it in cash, which will reduce the value over time. Rethink big expenditure. Now, touching upon low interest rate environment, it is very tempting to say, oh, it's interest rates are very low, let's go and buy a house. Interest rates are very low, let's go and get a lease and buy a vehicle. And right now, vehicle prices have really shot up because we don't have new vehicles coming in. And there is the second-hand market, which is very active right now. It is tempting, but the problem with that is we are in a very artificially, we are in a very uncertain time right now. And the thing with that is, at some point, interest rates will have to pick up. It's quite low right now, and it's somewhat artificially kept at that level, and it cannot be sustained for long. No one really knows as to how long the sustain is. Some people even said that it should have picked up by now. But the fact of the matter is, even if it's 2-3 years' time, interest rates will pick up. And say you went into a mortgage with your current income and assessing the current interest rates, because interest rates can get repriced. When interest rates pick up, your mortgage or how much you pay in a month gets repriced. And that leads to a pickup in how much you give on a monthly basis. Now, it would be good if it's all right if you're in a situation where the economy is doing well and your salary and your income is growing at the same pace. In that sense, a pickup in the rate is fine. You're earning better, you're getting promoted, your income sources are growing, so you can pay for it. But when you're in a situation where the economy is not doing well, the likelihood of a company keeping up your salary or your business growing at the same rate as your expenses is limited. So there is that lag effect. And because of that, going into a situation where you put down for a loan, in the risk, you do run the risk of seeing a reprice in monthly mortgage payments increasing, say in 2 to 3 years' time. Some I know have gotten into a 5-year fixed plan. Say you have good connections with banks, maybe you can get that done. In that case, pay it off as quickly as you can. If you are having a loan right now, I would say whatever excess cash you have, throw it towards a loan, pay it while you can, because the longer you wait, the interest accumulates. And you are allowed to pay if you have extra cash in hand, you are allowed to pay up extra if you need. And that brings down the balance you have left. And that brings down whatever interest, the amount of cash you pay in interest to the bank. So it's always good to allocate any extra cash you have towards these big investments you've taken. Another reason why you should rethink about getting something like a house at this point in time is most people, and this is quite controversial, but a house is considered the first asset you should get. It's the safety net. It symbolizes prosperity. But the issue with that is, if you are using a majority of your household income towards paying this, and you do say lose your job or you face a situation of loss of income, then you're in a bit of a fix. You have stretched your income quite thin, and you won't be able to meet it. It's leveraging yourself. You're putting yourself in a very, very high risk situation. So always go into a mortgage when your income is comfortable, so that you have a buffer for any surprise expenses, that you have a buffer for your supporting yourself and your family and day-to-day expenses. When that comfortable level is there and you have that extra cash in hand to go into a mortgage, should you only go, going at a point where it takes up 90-80% of your income is not safe, especially in this situation. So don't be tempted by low interest rates. It's quite artificial right now. Hedge your risks. So one way of hedging risks is getting into insurance policies. So you have instances where it's an unforeseen situation, either you with a disability that prevents you from working, or you have this health situation that stops you from working for a month or two. There are insurance policies that can help you with that and compensate at least part of the income for the time that you are not well. If you have insurance with theft and burglary in situations like this, we know there's a lot of break-ins and burglary happening. So having an insurance cover that compensates for that is a good thing. Life and health insurance cover, very important. Basically, the point of getting insurance is most people think I'm just giving money and I'm not getting anything returned. What you're doing is putting a very small amount of money on a periodic basis. In the event that an unfortunate incident happens and you incur a heavy loss, you are mitigating the risk of having to incur that huge cash outflow in one go by transferring that risk to another entity. And you're basically reducing the impact of such an event happening. Might happen, might not, but better to be safe than sorry. So insurance really helps you mitigate those risks. And insurance covers are also good in terms of well planning, or I wouldn't say it's the only good thing. And I think Loshani will touch upon this as well. It's good to have an insurance life cover as well to cover all these risks too. So finally, rethink your spending habits. Given that the future is a little uncertain, spend thinking that you might need this cash, that you need to be a bit more conservative. It's not to say that you need to cut out everything that you like in life. Substitute it in things that you could do. You can have those same experiences, but in a cost-effective way. Travel, but maybe travel light, travel cheap. Of course, right now we can't go anywhere outside the country, so we travel within the country, and there's many cheap opportunities right now when we can travel. If you like pizza, you like nice things to eat, learn to make it at home. Instead of going out with friends, maybe get your friends over to your house when you can, not right now. So those are things that you can do to still live your life, have your fun, but not incur a huge expense. Little trick I use is I depend on my credit card, but I've put a limit. And I always check, okay, this much goes for my insurance payment, this much goes for my expenses, day-to-day expenses, household, whatever. And this is how much I've left. And then I say yes to any social engagements, depending on where that buffer is. And come close to my deadline for the credit card payment. If it's hitting close, I'm like, sorry guys, I've run out of my social budget for the month. Next month, after the 15th, after the 14th. So it's a very good way to keep track of expenses on a credit card and then have paid off when the time comes and pay it off in time. So let's look at some possible scenarios of distress. Suggestions on how you could respond to various scenarios of financial distress. Credit card debt is a very famous one. There are people who would take one card, then they've run out on that limit, they take another card and another card and another card. Credit card is the worst form of credit there is. It's good if you are very, very strict with yourself, if you're very disciplined. It's a very good thing to have. It helps you when you have cash crunch situations and you need that extended line of credit for the month until your next payday is there, and you can cover those expenses. It's brilliant, but you have to be very disciplined. If you do get into credit card debt, go into a refinancing system where, say, you hit close to your date and you realize you spent more than your next income, or you were doing consulting gigs and you didn't get as much consulting opportunities that month or that period, and you have spent more because you haven't kept track. Don't let it unpaid. Don't let it go unchecked. Call your bank, get a personal loan. Because a personal loan you can get for about 9% right now, whereas a credit card bill overdue is about 18-20%, right? And the difference also is your personal loans calculate interest only on a monthly basis, whereas credit cards calculate the interest cost on a daily basis. So it compounds at a faster rate. Get on a personal loan, pay it off. Next is housing loan. So say you're in a situation where you're in a bankrupt situation and you have this housing loan to pay off. If you can give it on rent, move it to a smaller place, then you can sort of substitute some of it, at least, if that is a possibility. If not, you're better off selling any other existing assets you have. Say you have another land you inherited, or another small property that you're not using right now, you're better off selling off that asset, paying off your debt, start saving from scratch, rather than take more loans after more loans after more loans and compounding loans to pay off this one expense. It's not worth it. You might as well let it go and start from scratch. In a case of bankruptcy, sell it, pay off your debts, move into a small place or move into rent. Short term, it's much more easier. If you have a housing loan but no income problems per se, pay it off as quickly as you can, and that means you pay much less in interest cost. Any excess cash you get into your hand, if it's a bonus, if it's a lump sum you got from some sort of policy, throw it towards a housing loan. As much as you can, reduce the time you spend having a housing loan on your books. Job loss or income reduction, learn a new skill if that is the case. What we are seeing right now, especially in the leisure sector, is the best example to take. What we saw was really a shift of labor from leisure to agriculture sector. Lots of people just went into growing Alfonso mangoes in their back garden, or growing ginger or turmeric and selling it and processing it, going to organic farming. So there is always ways to switch industries, switch skills, learn a new skill. If you have any passions that you like, there's always ways to monetize it. Content creation, graphic designers, copywriters, software developers, these are skills that are very high in demand, and they're available virtual. There's so many online courses that you can jump on, very cost effective, that you can learn and start earning online. There are freelancing opportunities in Sri Lanka and outside of Sri Lanka as well. And even as a secondary source of income for yourself, if you're someone who is in a line of work that's not very time consuming, time demanding, consider a second source of income where you can earn a few dollars or something doing this one content creating assignment, one copywriting assignment, one software development project. It helps, and it helps to even grow yourself as a career person as well. Virtual freelancing is very good, access to job opportunities outside of Sri Lanka. Adversity is the mother of all invention. If you all have heard of Airbnb, Airbnb is a concept that actually came up during the last global financial crisis in 2008, 2009. And these guys help people who have these houses, who can't pay off their loans, to rent out their rooms to travelers who are looking for cheap ways to travel and not pay hefty hotel room fees. It was a perfect opportunity to use that situation and build this new product. WhatsApp is another thing as well, people looking for communicating, cheaper ways to communicate. So think outside the box, and nothing makes you think outside the box than an adverse situation. Debt traps are one thing, and I touched upon this before. Do not take on more debt to pay off one debt. Always think of what you can pay off with your existing assets, diversify income, extend your income, get another second job, pay it off. Don't take loans to pay off loans. Refinancing is different. Refinancing is, you have all these different, you have credit card loans, housing loan, car lease, everything. The bank offers you a product where, okay, we will give you a lump sum, pay all those things off, and reduce the interest costs that you incur in a month. That's a brilliant way to come out of these multiple lines of credit that you've accumulated to maintain a lifestyle. And of course, also ask yourself, is getting a Prado the real priority right now? Is it getting a house in Colombo 7 the real priority right now in terms of what cash you earn? Lastly, business debt. I know for SMEs, especially, accessing credit from banks is very difficult right now. So think of, I know this is very difficult, especially for family-based businesses, but think of getting another investor in. Think of letting someone else put in some money into your business. Yes, you would lose a share of your ownership of the business, but on the long run, it means that your business stays afloat, and this person's input might help you grow to an extent that you wouldn't have been able to let the business grow on your own. And so end of the day, net, you are on the win. You have grown and you have earned a better income. Hire consultants to streamline your operations, streamline your costs, streamline your workforce, and diversify your revenue streams. Now think, okay, in a time of diversity, what are the essential services that I can provide, essential goods I can provide? Food, agriculture is always a good direction to go into. So yeah, that's what I wanted to cover. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri. Those are some extremely practical tips all of us can follow to manage our expenses during this changing economic landscape specifically. Now that we've learned a little bit about how to manage our expenses and accumulate savings, the next step would be to know where to put those savings. What are my options and how do I pick one from all these many options that we have? So I would like to hand over the session to Loshini, our next speaker, to speak on personal wealth management. Over to you, Loshini.
Thank you, Arunya. It's a very difficult presentation to follow. She has set the standard very high. Today, my topic is personal wealth management with a touch of investing through a pandemic. As Arunya had mentioned, we have a very varied group of people who love numbers, who hate numbers. I don't know, some people are in between. So I'm going to cover it at a very top level and not go into technical jargon so that I don't put people to sleep. What is personal wealth management? It's basically a personal roadmap to your financial well-being. But if you get your finances messed up, everything nosedives, and there's a lot of social consequences to it. And if you don't manage your wealth well, you better really pray hard that your kids do really well in life so they can take care of you in your old age. Given marine life and ships have been in our mind due to the disaster on our coast, I want to use a boating analogy. Imagine we want to set a sail and cross the oceans. Before we decide on the type of boat that we should use, we should understand what are the winds and currents that we're going to face, what are the storms we are going to face, and how each different type of designs of boats will behave in different situations, and also how long the trip is going to take. That is when we can construct the boat. At present, all we know is that we have a boat, or we need a boat to go to our destination very fast or as quickly as possible, but also not capsizing on the way. The large boats are slow and steady, while the small ones, yeah, the speed is there, but there's a huge chance of capsizing. So we have a challenge at hand. Successful investment strategy must address both the same compromise on either. So basically, our investment choices are like our choice of the boat, which would give us the best return, at the same time, not make us lose our money, right? So there are a few things to consider, a few factors to consider. Firstly, it's risk appetite and risk tolerance. These are, again, technical jargon. So what I would like to say is it's the risk you're willing to take and also the risk you can bear. But you can't take risk blindly. You have to take into consideration your current economic situation requirements. Then objectives. When you come to objectives or goals, is what do you want to get out of this investment? Then types of investment. Come on, I'm sure most people here think the only investment are fixed deposits. Are you sure that's it? I don't think so, but I'll go through it in a bit. Then the age, not to, highlight people's age or anything, but based on the age, you have to decide what type of composition of investment assets you should take. I will go into detail about objectives, type of investment, and also your age and how that plays. Last but not least, tax implications. Oh yeah, so this is a big one because normally the return you take home after investing is after you pay taxes. So let's say you spend so much time, if you take so much time if you take so much time and effort and invest in some high risk asset to get a high return, but then you have to pay exorbitant amount of taxes, then what's the point? Is it worth your time and effort and taking that risk? Probably not. So you should know the tax implications on the different types of assets. As I said, I'll go in detail. Now we'll go into goals and objectives. You know, different people have different requirements. Some people plan for retirement. Some plan for early retirement. There are people who want to retire at 35, 40, good for them. But, you know, that is there. Then they say, you know, they need to manage their children's education, pay off their debt. Or they want to accumulate money so they can have fun at retirement. So each of the objectives, though, have different priorities. Some are nice to have and some are necessary, right? So these are things you have to take into account. You have to look at, because sometimes children's education is more important than maybe having an amazing holiday at retirement. So you need to, you know, manage what are your objectives in life. And that will tell you how quickly do you need the money? How much money do you need? So this is a very critical step, because if you don't know your destination, I can't tell, or no one can tell you the best route to go. So to reach there, you kind of got to know what are your destinations and what type of investments to invest. This is a myth, which is kind of overlapping with what Isuri said. Paper money is safe. Is it that safe? No, because there is something called inflation. She touched on it. I'll just give you a quick story. You might have heard these stories where your grandparents say things like, or your parents say, I used to buy lunch for 10 cents. I'm like, great, I don't even know how 10 cents look anymore, right? So they bought a lunch for 10 cents now, which will cost now about 100 rupees. This is more from my grandparents' time, from mine. And then that same 100 rupees is not going to be able, you won't be able to use the same 100 rupees to buy the same lunch in 10 years' time. So this is what inflation is. The 10 cents can't buy lunch now, and the 100 rupees that you can buy now can't buy in 10 years' time. So because of that, if there are things like inflation, if there are things like hyperinflation, like what you would see in countries like Venezuela and Zimbabwe, your stack of money that is safe in a vault is suddenly worthless, probably less worth than a toilet paper, right? But even if you don't go that far, and if you see the inflation that you see in Sri Lanka, slowly but surely, the money's value will erode away. So what you have to do is try and invest and get a return so you reduce the erosion and keep up with inflation. So that myth is busted. Paper money isn't safe. Then coming to now see what are the types of investments that are available to you out there. We'll start with FIC investments, which is fixed assets, basically debt securities, currencies, and commodities. So the first one, everyone's favorite, fixed deposits. What is it? Just put some money in the account, lock it in, earn some interest. You're good to go. That's it. Nothing to think about, nothing to worry about. Then there is foreign currencies. Isuri again touched on this. You have to keep the money in strong, stable foreign currencies, not some kind of Iranian rial or any other unknown currencies that aren't very stable, but more strong, stable currencies. And again, in this part, we can't buy foreign currencies using Sri Lankan rupees unless it's for travel purposes and certain transactions for medical and education abroad. So my thing on this is if you earn it, keep it. If it's in foreign currency, keep it in a personal foreign currency account or a business foreign currency account. If it's abroad, you can keep it there based on the regulations. Then we come to fixed income funds. Generally, there are debentures and things that are listed in the Colombo Stock Exchange, but it's extremely illiquid. So you don't get exposure to sovereign bonds and other corporate bonds directly. So you can invest in fixed income funds, which are essentially unit trusts, where these trusts go and invest in these securities, debentures, sovereign debt, different debt securities, money market assets. And what you do is you buy a unit of that trust and you become a beneficiary of that trust. So you get, it's like buying a share in that unit trust. So through that, you can buy and get some exposure and get some return from these fixed assets. Then again, Isuri mentioned this again, commodities, the main one in Sri Lanka is gold. Gold is always considered a safe haven asset. And this is the only asset, or commodity is the only asset, which it's not just a paper, but it's a tangible thing you can touch. Prices are high for gold, prices have been going up, but from what we can see, the rupee is depreciating against the dollar significantly, and maybe in the future, I can't predict the future per se, but most likely, so therefore the gold prices are supposed to go up. Then moving on, equities. Equities are generally higher risk than fixed assets. You take higher risk, you get higher reward. That's generally how it goes with equities. The first type of equity is private company shares. That is investing in private companies that is not listed in the Colombo Stock Exchange or anything. For this is not for everyone. Really, take my word, it's not for everyone. You need to know what you're doing. You need to understand company valuations. You need to be able to see projection, cash flows, understand, see value in the company and invest in it. Then you have buying and selling listed shares in the Colombo Stock Exchange. Basically, there are two ways to make money from investing in the Colombo Stock Exchange: buy low, sell high, basically increase in value of the shares. And the other is through dividends. So it depends on the type of assets you do. Some is capital appreciation and some are, constant dividend payouts. The next one is equity funds. This is similar to fixed income funds, but here the unit trust will invest in equities that are in the stock market, and then you buy a unit on the unit trust, and then you get some exposure to the equity. And these are generally managed by fund managers. Then there are other investments. People know this, cryptocurrencies, the new buzzword, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, everyone wants to put their money in it. This is a very, very high risk strategy, not for the faint-hearted. And also there is an issue, there is not a lot of fundamentals and know-how about cryptocurrency. And I will tell you, this is what happened. Some people know it. Last month in May, one tweet from Elon Musk, and the prices just plummeted and almost wiped out 30% of your value. You can lose 30% of your investment with one tweet. We saw that last month. So it is a very volatile thing. You need to know what you're doing. But also there's another problem. You cannot invest in cryptocurrencies from the money you have in Sri Lanka. This is only for people who are either dual citizens or foreign citizens or people who have earned money abroad and have money outside Sri Lanka. They're the only ones who can invest. You cannot take money from Sri Lanka and invest. So that is something for people to know, but if you're brave enough to invest, all for you. Then insurance schemes. Isuri mentioned this a few times too, but I will just talk about it from an investment point of view. First is life insurance scheme. And this is not only for something where in the event of death, your family benefits. Not really. You can invest in life insurance schemes for 25 years and where you put small payments now and you get a lump sum in 25 years time. So generally, this is about doubling your asset, probably roughly doubling your investment from now to 25 years time, if you just look at it. It is a low risk investment, so you can, look into that. Other thing is, as the same thing that Isuri mentioned, is health insurance. You don't want to be hit with a big a big hospital bill. So if that happens, you might have to pull things out of your, investment strategy, investment portfolio, and things can go amiss. So you can't reach your goals. There is one more thing I just wanted to mention. It's not very popular in Sri Lanka, but I spoke to an insurance agent and he said that's possible, is loss of employment insurance, which is something you could get if you're getting a mortgage, because in the event you've got a mortgage, normally they give for death and disability. But if you can get a loss of employment, which is a very big possibility during COVID, if that happens, at least the insurance company will pay your mortgage and the roof over your head is safe. So that is something you can still speak to your insurance companies and see what is there. The last type of investments that I want to go is real estate and REITs, which are real estate investment trusts. Real estate, it's the classic buy the actual property and building and see some appreciation. While REITs is the real estate investment trust. It is similar to like the equity and fixed income funds that I spoke before, where that trust will go and buy properties with the money collected from investors, the pools, and buy properties. You buy a share in the trust, and then you kind of get into the property bandwagon. If you can't really afford to pay and buy a full property, you can get a share of it. So these are REITs. The laws have been passed and tax concessions have been given for REITs already, but it's still not listed in the Colombo Stock Exchange. There's nothing yet. The hope is in the next year, but your guess is as good as mine. When it comes, it comes. And when it comes, you can buy it just similar to buying any other share in the stock market. Not complicated. So similar to buying shares in the stock market. That is the types of investment. Then, as I was talking, there's risk associated with every type of investment. Some are low risk, some are high risk. And if it's low risk, expected low return, high risk, high return, that's how it goes. Risk reward is like a balancing act. And the types of investment that I mentioned can fall anywhere in this riskometer, right? Anywhere in the middle of it. But for just the ease, I'm just bucketing it into low risk and high risk. So what are the low risk investments that I mentioned? Are generally the FIC assets that I mentioned, that is fixed deposit, debts, foreign currency investments, fixed income funds, and commodities. And then from the other investments, we have real estate and insurance schemes. Then what are the high risk ones? Generally, the different types of equity investments, REITs, cryptocurrencies, and derivatives. See, derivatives is not something I touched upon. I just added it here. It's basically an asset that derives its value from a different asset like equities. It's really complicated. It's not for people who don't understand the technical stuff. It is something that's probably going to be there in the future. There are some murmurs about it, but it's not in the Sri Lankan market yet. So when it comes, it's something, if people are interested, it's something for them to look into. Now that we've gone into the low risk and high risk assets, and what are low risk and which are high risk assets, you want to know what is the percentage of the money that you're investing that you want to invest in high risk and low risk. As a rule of thumb, if you're 65 years old, you invest 65% of your assets in low risk assets. And then 35%, which is 100 minus your age, in high risk assets. Unfortunately, this won't work if you're over the age of 100, but I'm assuming not many people here are over the age of 100, so we will stick to that. That's the rule of thumb there. And why is this? It's because when you're older, you need the money sooner. Your requirements are quicker. Therefore, you should, invest in safer assets, because if you invest in high risk assets and lose money, you have much, much less time to recover the money. So that, you still meet your goals. So low risk. So this is something that is there, but this is a general rule of thumb. I'm not saying it's specific to each and every one, because the requirements and objectives are different. So that the optimal asset allocation can vary. So that is something for people to understand. Then, what a beautiful poster or advertisement. If you see something like this, super fun way to burn 800 calories in, let's say, 30 minutes. So you're like, great, I can lose all the weight that I've gained in the last 10 years in the next month, and I will look like a supermodel. Is that really the case? I don't know. It just seems too good to be true. So if you take it at face value and you don't do your research, you may end up in a situation. What that actually meant is, pizza has 800 calories and you can burn it in 30 minutes if you're a terrible cook like me, right? So it's something, don't take it at face value, because you can end up in a situation of an investment like this. So if it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true, right? So when you're investing, there are all these opportunities, but there's a lot of fraud, there's a lot of dishonest, not good investments. So here are some red flags to look out for when you're investing. And when people are giving you investment opportunities, there are a lot of pyramid schemes, there are a lot of fraudsters, things to keep in mind when you look at them. Aggressive sellers, when they are a very, very pushy salespeople, be cautious. Risk-free investment opportunities. There is nothing that is risk-free in life. So when people give you such guarantees, again, it's a warning. Same thing goes with promise of great wealth and guaranteed return. There's nothing guaranteed in life. That's the same thing. When they give that such big guarantees, you generally are to look up. Why is it? What is it, right? If there is such risk-free return and such great guarantees, all of us will invest and all of us will be millionaires or billionaires. But that's not the case. So beware. Next one is everyone is buying it. This is a very scary situation. Warren Buffett, one of the best investors in the world, says, when everyone gets excited, I'm cautious. When everyone's cautious, I'm excited. Right? There you go. So just don't blindly follow the herd. I'm sure given lockdown, but the main thing most people are doing is binge watching Netflix. If that's the case, check out this show, which is called Bad Boy Billionaires. This is about rogue Indian billionaires. And go and catch the episode, which is about the Sahara Group. It was a typical pyramid scheme where the poor of the poorest people put their life savings just because everyone was doing it. There you go. Be careful. What are the other red flags? Pressure to invest now. Why now? Why not tomorrow? Ask those things. Why is it? Things like that happen. Over the top pictures, sensational, presentations. Again, these are red flags to look at. Then other thing is when there are unsolicited pictures and trying to get your personal information, or when they say pay for an investment to a personal account or wire it abroad to an account abroad. These are red flags, doesn't seem right. Again, rule of thumb, too good to be true is something you have to look at. It's probably bad. It's the same thing. If something tastes so good, it's really bad for you when you eat it. So something like that. Keep that in mind when you think of investments. Then, how to avoid these type of situations? There are fraudsters, there are things all around, but here are a few things for people to look at when they are investing. One thing, ask questions. Ask loads and loads of questions. If someone is bluffing or trying to trick you, they will trip somewhere. So keep asking questions. Research before investing. ask a lot of people what's going on, and there is something known as Google. So Google it. See, do your research before investing. There is no reason to be in haste. Background checks. If possible, do background checks on the personnel that who are promoting these investments. A good way is to look at LinkedIn. It's a professional site. Most of the investors should, or people who are promoting should be there. See which company are they saying is backing, see how many followers are there, what are people saying. Follow LinkedIn. It's probably a good way to do some background checks. I'm not the expert in it, but that's something that I would do. This is the most important. Don't invest if you don't understand. I repeat, don't invest if you don't understand. That's the biggest mistake people do, is investing without understanding. Then I just want to touch a little bit on emerging out of the pandemic. First and foremost, you have to survive the pandemic. So to survive, take care of your health. If you don't survive the pandemic, there's nothing to emerge out of, right? So this is the first and foremost. Then in a situation where the market is so uncertain, we have so many unknown things, we don't know what's going on. More than wealth accumulation, wealth preservation is important. You have to preserve your wealth, taking into account inflation, something that I have mentioned, something that Isuri has mentioned. And then to say, taking a bit more high risk strategies, which can help you accumulate your wealth, because given the uncertainties, there can be a bigger chance of adverse moves, bad outcomes, a lot bigger, because a lot of uncertainties, this is not something a lot of models can project. You don't know where it's going to go. So it is something for you to look. First preserve, then accumulate. So touching on that point, to preserve your wealth and be as well off next year as you are this year, you should try and get return of income equal to at least inflation. As for the official records, the inflation is 5% in 2020. I don't know, cost of living is going up right now. My mom's saying the prices are going through the roof. So, you know, I don't know, is it 5%, 10%? It can go up. So try and get a return at least as much as inflation, so you can buy the burger that you bought last year, this year, right? Then this is something Isuri mentioned, and I'm just touching on it, emergency fund, or some people say rainy day fund. Why is this important when you're investing? Is if you don't have this for those unknown situations, you will have to pull out money from your investment strategy and then it goes a mess, right? So just on that aspect. Debt strategy refinancing, again, she touched on it. These are some things I'm saying again because it's important. Again, Warren Buffett says, I seem to like to quote Warren Buffett today, he says, don't spend and then save, save and then spend. But Sri Lankans don't seem to be taking his advice so much. Generally, they borrow, spend, they're almost drowning to see how they can pay the banks. Is that a good strategy when you're in a pandemic situation and coming out? Probably not, because a lot of uncertainties, a lot of things are going up and down. So there might be a chance that suddenly you will just drown and not be able to pay because there's loss of income and all sorts of things. So good to review your debt strategy and then also look at refinancing. Isuri mentioned, I don't want to go into too much details. Refinance, basically see if you can, lower your interest cost and interest burden. Last but final least, I just want to mention diversification. Basically, don't put all your eggs in one basket when investing. Try and put them in different investments and not all money in one investment. So that if something goes bad, it won't be such a big hit for you. So diversification is key. I have mentioned a lot of different types of assets that you can invest and things to explore. So make sure you diversify. And with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Loshini. I think you did a good job of simplifying the complicated concept of risk and risk allocation and asset allocation. With this, now we can open the session to the participants. For any questions you have, please post your questions in the chat and we will take them up as much as possible in the next 20 to 25 minutes. Actually, we have some good time. Maybe I can kick off, starting off in general, is we spoke about how I manage my budget, but before I manage my budget, I need to come up with a budget. So what would you say are some of the key things that I should look at, or key factors that one should start looking at in coming up with a budget?
Okay. So first thing I would do is say, let's take 1 year. Assess what your income is. Now, if you're someone with a stable salaried income, then you can barely understand, okay, for the next 12 months, this is going to be my income. Then you list out all your big expenses. Okay, I pay a mortgage of X amount a month, or I pay rent X amount a month. I have my gym fees of X that's coming up in January that I need to renew. I have my car insurance that comes up in November. I have another big expenditure, exam fees that needs to pay. Figure out all these expenses first and foremost. Make that list and then divide it by 12 for the next few months that's coming up. How much of my monthly income should I allocate? So that time comes, I have to pay off my car insurance, that I don't have this all of a sudden cash outflow in one go, that I have slowly accumulated the funds for it, and that when the time comes, I can direct those funds towards it. What people do is, oh, I have my insurance to pay next month, I'm tight this month. Christmas is coming up, I haven't saved up a buffer. So my general rule is Christmas and Aurudu, planning gifts, planning expenditure, your car insurance, those kind of things. I always have monthly amounts going to them. Then you create a very strict budget of, I only spend this much a month. After that, you can see how much you've got saved up, right? How much of that am I willing to spend on a monthly basis for expenses? Leave a little side for, say, a gift, weddings coming up. Take those things all into consideration, leave a buffer, right? And see how much you save. If it's not enough, then you have to tighten your expenses. Of course, this calculation also has to start with, what's my savings goal for the year? Now, if you're someone who is, still early in their career, they're a bit, paycheck to paycheck, then your savings goals, it makes sense to keep it small, right? If you're 25, just starting out in your career, your biggest savings goal is, okay, I want to make this trip in 3 months' time, let's save up for that. But if you're, say, in your 30s and your 40s and you're starting to accumulate some sort of a substantial excess income, then you have to start thinking about savings. You have to start thinking about retirement. It makes sense to do that when you have reached a point in your career or your business life that income is to that extent. If you're earning an income of only 50,000, but you're starting to think of retirement, then it doesn't make sense. Reach that level. So part of budgeting your life is think of these day-to-day expenses, but also budget out your career. You have to make moves such that your income will be at a certain point when certain expenses start coming in your life, certain commitments start coming in your life. So career budgeting, income budgeting, and expenses budgeting has to go in one go. Always make sure that you don't put undue stress on your liquidity on a monthly basis. That's the basic trick.
The next question revolves around savings again. What is a good percentage of your monthly income to be saved and invested? I think another related question would also be, how much should go into my retirement pot? How much should I save and how much should I allocate to my retirement pot?
Okay, so this actually, rule of thumb they say is, okay, 1/4 you have to keep for retirement kind of thing. But it also depends on you. So you have to sort of do a back calculation. Ask yourself, given the commitments I expect to have by the end of my lifetime or the end of my career, if that lifetime is today, how much of money should I have right now? If I was to take my ETF, my insurance lump sums, gratuity, all that together, park it, say, in a bank and earn interest from it, how much should I be getting cash to my hand on a daily basis to meet my current lifestyle, right? Now, you're not retiring now, but you're looking in current terms, what could it be? Apply inflation for that and then project forward. And that will tell you how much you need to save by this time. That's when you start asking yourself questions. Okay, right now, how much I'm earning is not going to be enough to save up that amount by that time. That's when you start thinking, okay, I need to think of another source of income. I need to think about starting a business. All those existential questions start coming in when you have done that calculation. But that's your starting point. Then you realize, okay, how much do I start saving? But if that's too big of a starting point for you, start small. How much can I put aside now? Can I put 5? Okay, put 5. Can I put 10? Put 10. Think I can do a bit more. Start little by little, accumulate an amount, then you put into various investment opportunities that come your way. Then you start building. Then when you say hit your 40s, then you have to plan out, okay, kids, I have to start thinking of a house, maybe another property, vehicle, all that. At this point in time, it makes sense to maybe get some advice from a tax consultant or a wealth manager or something. But generally, start small. That's the rule. If you're in your early 30s, late 20s, start small. Start with 5,000-10,000, see where it accumulates. Then you can work to it. Yeah,
And
that's
just
how I
a
look
bit
at it.
on that, I would like to add, and some people do this, and it's probably a step if you're not very well into managing your investments and stuff, is having multiple bank accounts where you kind of put a certain fixed amount, move it at the beginning as soon as your salary comes in, so you don't touch it. It'll also help you after you decide on the percentage, even if it's 5 or 10, what you don't really need, and say that is my upper limit, I can't spend anything more. This money goes out as soon as you get your paycheck. Don't wait till the end of the month and then say what is left and then let me move it. No, as soon as you get your paycheck, you should try and move it into that, whatever the different fund that you want to do. It can be a long term, it can be a short term fund, for whatever purpose.
Actually, that is something I practice personally. And apart from, all of us would have a salary account. Salary accounts wouldn't give you a higher interest rate, but then there are what are known as bumper savings accounts. A lot of banks offer them. Look for the savings product. Look at such a account and pick one of those accounts to put in to park in your emergency fund. Beware of opportunities where you can make money, because your normal savings account would give you 2 to 3% interest rate right now, but that other savings account is going to give you almost the same as your FD rates, which is 6-month FD rates, which is 3.5-4%. So you can consider accounts like that. Another question, I think both of you have touched upon this in your presentation as well, how to cope with inflation and what kind of plan we need to make to prepare for it. Maybe Loshini.
Yeah, so it's a tricky question. How to cope with inflation. So as I said, we can't predict of how the inflation is going, and currently we are in a very uncertain time, especially with our bill of requirement to pay foreign debt repayments, which are due in the next month or two itself, and I don't know how that's going to impact the rupee. So with inflation, what I would say, it's a tricky thing, but again, using, not, as I said, diversify your portfolio. And I gave you certain percentages on how to invest high, low risk assets. So don't put everything in one. Put some high risk investments where you can potentially get higher return, right? But not everything in it. That's the only way you can kind of cope, is diversify, put a bit in the low and put a bit in the high risk. But one thing with high risk investments is you have to also be willing to lose all the money and be okay with it. So you put that and hope that will work. But having a diversified portfolio, as I said, will not, hit you too much. So that's the way you would have to go about with inflation. See, if hyperinflation comes, your guess is as good as mine. If you have only rupees, then again, I would say if you have foreign currency, keep it in foreign currency.
If I may add to what Loshini said, gold is also another good option. So gold actually shot up in price from last year. And that's largely because your major investors globally went to safe haven assets, and the demand for safe haven assets meant that the prices went up. So now that things are settling elsewhere in the world, chances are that gold prices might come down. So why would you put your money in gold right now? The thing is, things are not settling in Sri Lanka yet.
So it's relative.
Yeah, exactly. It's relative. So in Sri Lanka, the rupee will continue to weaken even against gold. So if you don't have access to USD right now, gold is your next best bet. Even if it's expensive, put your money down there. Put your money down there, and then you can use that as a way to preserve your capital. Gold is always a good option any day.
Just on that note, there was a question that came in earlier. Can we invest in US dollars right now? No, we cannot in Sri Lanka unless you cannot buy US dollars in general in Sri Lanka unless and until even before the pandemic, if you were traveling outside. So that is something, I guess.
Just to touch on that, you can, before there was a provision allowed where you can have an OIA account where you're going to invest in foreign companies or debt, where you can convert rupees into foreign currency and then invest abroad. But right now, until the 2nd of July, it is on freeze. So you can't even invest on those. But you can't just buy dollars or any foreign currency and keep in the country using rupees. So that's just something for people to be very aware.
The other question is more of, I think, each individual's perspective. I'll ask both of you to give your thoughts on it. What is your opinion on using insurance as an investment? I think it's also related to those insurance products which give you an investment return. So yeah, it's an opinion. So for the general audience, guys, it's only every individual's opinion. So we can't give you a hard stead yes, no answer to this. So maybe Ishri, you can go first on your opinion. Yep. And Shani next.
Sure. Personally, I use insurance as a risk mitigating strategy rather than investment. I know the thought of parting money for something that you don't see tangible return, it takes a piece out of you. I understand that concept, but also think of the multi different things that can go wrong and how you can reduce the impact it has on your life. As an investment, something that happened early last year or even 2018 was when interest rates were very high. That I'm talking 12, 13, 14% on FD, when it was like that. So this is 2018 basically. Lots of these investment products that insurance companies had saw people pull money out of those products because they were getting a better return putting in the bank than they did at the insurance company. But now it's the reverse. Now there's a huge demand for it because you have these insurance companies that have invested in high yield, say company debt, debentures that are giving about 8 to 12%. So there are insurance companies that are offering a decent return. So it's a good, safe asset. You can keep it there. It can be one of the options you look at. They do have retirement funds, retirement management, wealth management sort of products that insurance companies have. I would say use it as one of it, not all. My first one, if I am to just say, my first one was an insurance product as well. So I have an X amount of money, but it's also a health life insurance product. So there are various hybrid products out there you can look at. The amount that they allow me to claim as health every year accumulates. So it had very, very lengthy conversations with all these insurance guys that approach you. Ask them questions. If I put this amount for this, if I put this amount for that, you get to pick what amount of your monthly amount that you pay or the once in 6 month annual, whatever your premium is, they tell you okay, X amount goes towards your health insurance cost, X amount goes towards your investment, X amount goes towards death and disability cover, XYZ. Then you can calibrate. It's like, okay, increase the health, reduce investment, reduce this, or increase investment, reduce the health. You can play around with it. See what you're comfortable with. So that option is there. Use it as one, I would say, and more as a risk mitigating, because it seems like it's a low return, but there's so many other things that they cover, so many other situations, issues that you can't foresee that they might help you with. So look at it in terms of that, but don't put all money on a retirement fund either. That's just, you're costing too much yield on yourself. It's very stable, but not all. Like, don't depend on in one retirement product towards the insurance company. Just like Loshini said, put your eggs in multiple baskets. It's one good basket to think of.
Loshini, what do you think?
So again, it's a very similar kind of comment. It's a risk mitigating tool, because what happens is people, as you say, they find it very difficult. I did risk management in my previous job, and it's always very difficult to explain to people to risk manage, because they can't foresee the loss. They can't see the benefit, right? So something like a health benefit, a health insurance, that is so that it doesn't mess with your rest of your investments, is my view of it, where it mitigates, because you can then, put this, and if there's a big bill, you're taken care of. You don't need to worry. You have to think of it, of health insurance is not a bad thing, because in America, a lot of people go bankrupt because health insurance is exceptionally expensive and there's no public health, right? While here we do have, but if you want to take the certain types of treatment, you have to go private, and then you will get hit with that bill. So having a health insurance is not a bad thing, right? You can't say what it is, but you have to look at your objectives and your financial situation. Again, in terms of the life insurance side, it's, as I said before, it's not only for in terms of death, it's an investment, and it's a low risk investment. So you can put a little bit of money there and hope to see return, because you think you might get more putting it in an FD or something, because normally you double. And as Sri was saying, with the low interest rate, in 20 years, if it's doubles, it's more or less, 100% increase is 5% per year, whatever. But you won't normally keep the money. Even if you put it in the fixed deposit, there's a tendency of taking it. While here you have to pay, and then you get it at the end, right? So it's a bit like a mentality shift. You can't touch that money. So if you're committed to it, you will get a lump sum in 20 years' time. So it's not a bad thing to look at. Again, it's specific person to person. And I also said, given in the pandemic, look at things like loss of employment and different things. Insurance are great, but also read the fine print. Okay, because there are a lot of things that are there that there are a lot of exclusions. So see what is there and see where the pros and cons, and then go for it.
Just another thing to add is, you can say you have an insurance life policy. You can use it as an asset against which you can take loans, or even your insurance provider can sometimes take loan, provide you loans. That's just one tip. But again, like Loshini says, read the fine print. There's a lot of things that you think that they would cover for, but they don't. So read every document you get, every document, the indenture.
25 pages is worth it to read every page of it.
Worth it. Ask them questions. Anything, any investment product you go to, ask a million questions.
All right. So that brings us, we are a little over time also, almost to the end of our session. Thank you, Isri and Loshini. I'm going to try and quickly summarize what you guys said in a much more detailed manner and hand it over to Tahira. Some of the key things that we touched upon in terms of expense management would be to maintain a rainy day fund, 1, 2, to diversify your income sources, 3, preserve your capital, consider investing in capital preserving assets like gold, land, hedge your risks with products like insurance. We just spoke about this. Rethink your spending habits. Maybe you don't need that pizza, like Isri said. We also saw that how paper money is not going to be worth the same tomorrow. You're not going to be able to buy that pizza with the same $1,000. And the different investment options. A rule of thumb would be to invest your age as a percentage in what we call as low risk options. What are these low risk options? It would be fixed deposits, debt funds, commodities like gold, and currencies if you have access to stable currencies like US dollar. Real estate and insurance are also other low risk options that you can consider. And high risk options would be equities, invest in Colombo Stock Exchange, but beware, if you don't understand it, don't go there. REITs, which might come up, private equity opportunities. I would always recommend that to be the last. And again, emphasizing low risk should get the same percentage as roughly your age. And Loshini also told us how not to get scammed. If it's too good to be true, guys, it really is not. So right now, focus on preserving your wealth before you accumulate. Good luck and thank you guys for joining the session. Tyra, over to you.
Thank you, Arunya. Before we conclude today's session, I would like to thank our speakers for today, Ms. Isuri Munasinghe and Ms. Loshini Gajendran, for the very informative session. Thank you so much. In addition, I would also like to extend my gratitude to all those who joined this session via Zoom and also on Facebook and YouTube. And in addition, I would also like to thank the Director of Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center and the Cultural Officer, Ms. Subhashini Handy, and all instructors and members of AYM. Then 2021 by Ms. Amalka and Ms. Trishanti on body alignment in asana from 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. And looking forward to seeing most of you then. Thank you and have a nice evening.
Thank you.